Every year of football is special in its own right, but 2012 might just be the most iconic of all time. Because in 2012, we witnessed the greatest goal-scoring run ever.
Retrasando pelota Messi!
The most iconic end to a Premier League season.
Aguero!
And even the Champions League trophy won from a legend's final touch.
He's done it! The greatest night in the history of Chelsea Football Club!
We saw the best team ever assembled overthrown. We saw records that'll likely never be beaten, as well as new rules, transfer betrayals, and unbeaten title runs. Not to mention the peak of the greatest national team of all time, coupled with unlikely trophy wins across Europe and South America. There were internet-breaking celebrations, unforgettable fallouts, and contenders for the greatest goal of all time, and this all makes up just some of the things that happened throughout the year. So, this is a full recap of 2012, the most iconic year in the history of football. Before we get to 2012, it's important to give some context into the football landscape at the time, because football was a totally different game heading into 2012. Starting in Spain, Pep Guardiola's Barcelona side featuring legends Messi, Iniesta, and Xavi had won 2 of the last 3 Champions Leagues in spectacular fashion, as their revolutionary tiki-taka style had embarrassed Man United in the 09 and 11 finals. Having already swept the previous 3 Ballon d'Or and La Liga titles, Messi, who was deployed in the false 9 role, orchestrated Barcelona's dominance as the Catalan club danced past nearly every opponent, with whispers of greatest team of all time growing louder. Moving to their El Clasico rivals, Real Madrid had spent heavily on Cristiano Ronaldo, Kaká, and Karim Benzema in recent years to build a new Galactico super team, but were unable to secure major silverware as Barcelona's golden era showed no signs of slowing. So, the Madridistas did the unthinkable as they appointed Jose Mourinho in an attempt to restore La Liga's natural order during the 11-12 season. And Real weren't the only traditional giants struggling to negotiate evolving dynamics, because looking over at England, Man United had won 4 of the previous 5 titles under Sir Alex Ferguson, but a new mega-rich force had landed in town. And by town, we literally mean town, because 7 kilometers south of Old Trafford, United's noisy neighbors Man City had been bought by billionaire Emirati owners with ambitions of taking over the Premier League. The citizens were once the joke of English football, but with newfound financial power allured Carlos Tevez, Emmanuel Adebayor, Yaya Toure, and Robinho away from United, Arsenal, Barcelona, and Real Madrid, along with signing future legends like Sergio Aguero, Vincent Kompany, and David Silva to build a team that could end United's 20-year-long dominance. And as 2012 drew closer, a changing of the guard moment unfolded under Sir Alex's eyes as City thrashed United 6-1 at Old Trafford. But could they pull off the unthinkable? In Germany, Borussia Dortmund were enjoying their moment in the sun after Jurgen Klopp's revolutionary tactics dethroned Bayern Munich as they went into 2012 as favorites to retain their crown. Meanwhile, in France, PSG had recently been purchased by the Qatar Sports Investment Group as they intended to make the Parisian club the wealthiest and most powerful in Europe. They were sure to finally get their hands on that league title, unless an underdog really came out of nowhere to stop them. And lastly, looking over to Italy, Juventus appeared to have finally recovered from their years of financial mismanagement, demotions, and inferiority to Inter and AC Milan, because as the 2011-12 season hit December, the Old Lady were second in the league and unbeaten at the turn of the year. But could they really overthrow the imposing AC Milan? And funnily enough, each and every league, team, or dynasty I just mentioned was about to change as the year turned, because 2012 was not just the greatest year in history, but the year that changed football forever, as it literally shaped the next era of football, with dynasties failing and rising in every single competition. And I tell you, this is about to get very exciting. 1st of January 2012, and Jose Mourinho's Real Madrid sit top of the La Liga table, clear of second place Barcelona by 5 points. In La Liga, something unthinkable was happening. Despite Messi's imperious goal-scoring form, which saw the little Argentine net 17 goals before the turn of the new year, Guardiola's seemingly unstoppable Barcelona team trailed Real Madrid in by 5 points. With talk of Barcelona's decline swirling in international media, the El Clasico giants faced off in a 2-legged Copa del Rey tie in January. A clash that tested whether Jose Mourinho could finally topple his great rival once more. It was their first meeting of 2012, which meant Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo were battling out on a personal level for that year's Ballon d'Or. Across a fiery 2 legs, CR7 showed the world he was ready to go toe-to-toe with Messi, scoring 3 goals in the tie. But despite his brilliance, Madrid were edged out in a dramatic 4-3 aggregate defeat to Barcelona. At the time, it wasn't clear that Messi and Ronaldo would continue to dominate dominate football for the next decade, and talk about who their successor as the world's greatest player could be was swirling. Players like Romelu Lukaku, Stefan El Shaarawy, and Lucas Moura put their names into the ring, but there was only one player the world was taking seriously: Neymar Jr., a flamboyant, street-skilled Brazilian genius. The 19-year-old Santos winger's audacious tricks, flicks, and gravity-defying dribbling went viral online and marked the beginning of a new way young supporters interacted with the beautiful game. In previous years without digital media, the brilliance of a jaw-dropping wonder kid playing in the Brazilian Serie A might have seemed mythical, but Neymar's genius was available for the world to see on YouTube, and his hype reached a crescendo on January 9, 2012 with his unbelievable solo goal against Flamengo that eventually won him the FIFA Puskás Award. But Neymar wasn't the only underdog threatening to overthrow football's traditional ruling class, because Klopp's Borussia Dortmund were powered by an emerging goal-scoring machine named Robert Lewandowski. The 23-year-old Polish striker provided 6 goal contributions in 2 games at the start of 2012 as Dortmund went level on points in the Bundesliga with Bayern Munich. Elsewhere, Juventus went level on points with AC Milan at the top of Serie A, and this was not supposed to be happening, as the Milan Giants were imperious throughout the 2000s, winning numerous Italian and Champions League titles, but perhaps they were starting to get complacent, because the star of Juventus's charge to compete against AC Milan was midfield maestro Andrea Pirlo, who'd been controversially deemed surplus to requirements and released by AC Milan at the end of the last season. And as the year unfolded, this would prove to be one of the biggest mistakes the club has ever made, as the aging Italian was spraying passes across midfield for the old lady, and the impossible return to glory seemed plausible, because by the end of January, Juventus still hadn't lost a Serie A match. Now, February began on a slightly darker note as Luis Suarez was handed an 8-game ban after racially abusing Patrice Evra, and this sparked an even greater controversy, as instead of condemning the incident, Liverpool decided to do the total opposite. During the warm-ups for a Premier League tie against Wigan Athletic, Liverpool's players, including Jamie Carragher and Steven Gerrard, bizarrely wore shirts in support of the Uruguayan striker. It became a media frenzy as the 2 giant clubs of English football would meet in a game at Old Trafford just a couple of weeks later, and despite promising to shake Evra's hand and move on from the incident, Suarez blanked and dodged the Man United fullback's handshake, inciting controversy before the game even began. United won the heated derby match 3-1, and Evra contrasted Suarez's cold shoulder dramatically by celebrating exuberantly in front of the Liverpool talisman. But unfortunately, the Suarez-Evra clash wasn't the only English racism scandal of the month, as Fabio Capello stepped down as England manager after the FA stripped John Terry's captaincy in response to the Chelsea centre-back being found guilty of racially abusing Anton Ferdinand, marking a controversial month to say the least. But looking at the football, Man City remained ahead of rivals Man United by 2 points as February came to a close, and talk of the citizens getting their hands on a first Premier League title was intensifying. Elsewhere, Messi was already on his way to achieving a record-breaking campaign as the little Argentine bagged 4 against Valencia and 5 against Bayer Leverkusen, taking his 2012 tally to 20 goals before the end of February. The record for goals in a calendar year stood at 85, so Messi was going to have to keep up this form for the entire year if he stood any chance at breaking that. But incredibly, Messi's brilliance wasn't doing Barcelona any favors in the league, because by game week 25, Real were already 10 points clear and looked set to run away with the title. Meanwhile, in Germany, Borussia Dortmund were on fire during February as they won every Bundesliga match they played in and established a comfortable 4-point lead over Bayern Munich. And in Italy, Juventus and AC Milan met in a crucial fixture at the San Siro. The pair were tied at the top of the table on goal difference, and a resolute away performance earned the old lady a point, ensuring they stayed well within the title race. Over in France, the race for the Ligue 1 title was heating up. Montpellier, a team from a small French city more recognizable for its wine culture than football, were defying the odds and competing with PSG's multi-million-pound team. After 4 back-to-back victories, Montpellier arrived at Parc des Princes a point off the top spot, and a hard-fought 2-2 draw ensured they remained in the race to win their first Ligue 1 title. But 2012 was more than just club football, because this month saw a remarkable story in the African Cup of Nations as Zambia stunned Africa by winning its first ever AFCON final on penalties against Didier Drogba's Ivory Coast team. Ivory Coast were the clear favorites, as Didier was one of the best strikers in the world at the time, but somehow Zambia did it. Drogba returned to Chelsea hurt, but trust me, Drogba's story and redemption wasn't done yet. When the devastated Ivory Coast striker returned to Chelsea, realistic ambitions of winning silverware during his final season in West London were in tatters. Chelsea were 5th in the Premier League, 17 points behind the leaders, and had already been knocked out of the League Cup. That left them with the Champions League as the only option to save their season, but they seemed a million miles short of the strength of Barcelona, Real Madrid, and Bayern Munich, who they'd have to beat in order to win it. So, Roman Abramovich sacked struggling manager Andre Villas-Boas and replaced him with Roberto Di Matteo, Chelsea's former assistant coach. Di Matteo had never managed a team at the top level before, and the London club's season looked like it was going to fade into nothing. Yet, after a favorable Champions League draw saw the London club edge past Napoli and Benfica, they earned themselves a shock place in the semi-finals. However, the task was daunting. They'd face Guardiola's Barcelona in a tie nobody gave them a chance of progressing from. But since the Premier League was long out the window, and Di Matteo had almost an entire month to conjure up a master plan, and you won't believe the drama that would unfold in this tie in the following month. But Di Matteo wasn't the only manager who needed a master plan, because Man City's form during March took a turn for the worse, including a shock defeat to the mighty Swansea City, a draw against Stoke City, which saw Peter Crouch score an absolute worldie, and a tie with relegation-threatened Sunderland, meaning they lost their lead to Man United and looked set for another year in the shadows of world-famous neighbors, and the tension in England just kept on building. But one team who were showing no signs of throwing away their lead at the top was Real Madrid. At the end of March, Los Blancos had won 13 and drawn 2 of their last 15 La Liga matches, won back-to-back games 5-1, and practically had one hand on the title. Something was different about this Real Madrid, and Jose Mourinho, he had them firing on all fronts. The defensive tactician had seemingly put together the best attacking team in Europe, and coupled with Ronaldo's 17 La Liga goals since the return of the year, supporters really started to wonder if Real could win their first Champions League since 2002, as they were drawn against Bayern Munich for the following month's semi-final. But the tie wouldn't be straightforward, because the Bavarian side were in desperate need of redemption themselves, as they faced a devastating 1-0 loss at Signal Iduna Park against Dortmund, and now trailed their D Klassia rivals by 6 points. Almost unthinkably, Bayern looked set to miss out on the Bundesliga title to Klopp's energetic gegenpressing team. Young stars like Mario Götze, Robert Lewandowski, Mats Hummels, and Ilkay Gundogan were among the most exciting players in Europe at the time, and were each linked with moves to elite European teams. The reputation Klopp and his youngsters were building in the Bundesliga would help to define football for the following decade, but more on that later. In Serie A, Juventus extended their unbeaten run into 29 games as the Old Lady beat Fiorentina 5-0 away from home before seeing off Inter Milan the following week. But rivals AC Milan had won each of their last 8 Serie A matches, including the previous month's draw against Juve, and somehow returned to the top of the table. This was a title race that looked set to go to the wire. It was a similar story in Ligue 1, because after 29 matches, Montpellier were level on points with PSG, and dreams of winning a first top-flight title were hanging on a knife's edge. Even still, few were giving the Southern France outfit a chance against PSG's millions, until a door was opened on March 31st after the Parisians suffered a shock 2-1 loss to Nice. Montpellier responded with an iconic 3-1 win away at Marseille to go 3 points clear at the top of Ligue 1 with just 8 games remaining. Despite the hundreds of millions of pounds spent, 3 Premier League titles, and a team of stars like Frank Lampard, Didier Drogba, and John Terry, Chelsea had never lifted a Champions League trophy, but that doesn't mean they hadn't been deserving of one. Liverpool's semi-final ghost goal wrongfully denied them a place in the final in 2005. In 2009, Chelsea were controversially denied a place in the final again after Tom Hennig produced one of the worst refereeing performances of all time to help Barca sneak past the London club and earn a place in the final. So, as Chelsea met Barca for another semi-final in 2012, the team had a chance for justice, but the tides had shifted massively since the pair last met. Throughout the 2000s, Chelsea were considered among the best teams in Europe, but as Guardiola and Messi's tiki-taka football took over Europe and won Champions League titles in 2009 and 2011, the London club were barely considered in the same stratosphere as the Catalan geniuses. When Messi, Iniesta, Xavi, and Busquets stuttered onto the turf of Stamford Bridge, almost everybody expected a slaughter, but against all the odds, a ferocious London atmosphere fired Chelsea to a 1-0 first leg win through a Didier Drogba strike. Still, expectations of Chelsea holding on to their lead at the Camp Nou were limited, and expectations of defeat turned to resignation as captain John Terry received a red card with the Blues already down a goal on the night. Iniesta scored to make it 2, but Ramirez struck to level the tie and moved Chelsea ahead on away goals just before halftime. Incredibly, 10-man Chelsea remained resolute prelude to Barca's second-half onslaught, and after 90 minutes were on the brink of an unlikely qualification to a first-ever Champions League final. In response, Guardiola sent all his players forward for an attack in the final seconds. It was the moment everybody expected Barcelona to get themselves out of jail and win a place in the final, but something truly remarkable happened. After the ball was blocked and cleared by a Chelsea defender, it landed at Fernando Torres' feet, who found himself with the entire Barcelona half to run into.
The most dramatic story of the season. It's Torres to give Chelsea a place in the Champions League.
Unbelievable!
He rounded the keeper and slotted the ball into the empty net to book Chelsea's place in the final. And adding to Barcelona's woes, Real Madrid were unstoppable, winning all but 4 La Liga matches between January and the end of April to secure the title for the first time during Guardiola's reign, finally putting an end to the Guardiola dynasty in Spain. But Jose Mourinho's Los Blancos were the clear favorites to win the Champions League too, as they faced Bayern Munich in the competition's semi-final. The German club had a big reputation in the Champions League, but they weren't the same as the one who'd conquered Europe in yesteryear. By the time of the semi-final, they'd already squandered the Bundesliga to Klopp's Dortmund team, and everybody agreed that if the Bavarians couldn't compete for the title in Germany, they had no chance against Mourinho's star-studded side. But against the odds, Bayern frustrated Madrid at the Allianz Arena and came away with a shock 2-1 victory. But like Chelsea in the other semi-final, few supporters expected the Bundesliga's second-place side to have much of a chance at the Bernabeu, and Real wasted no time in stamping their authority on the tie. Ronaldo scored twice within the opening 14 minutes to flip the game on its head, but it just didn't happen. Robin scored after 27 minutes to level the tie, and the game eventually went to penalties, where Ronaldo, Kaká, and Sergio Ramos missed spot kicks to help Bayern reach an unlikely Champions League final against Chelsea, and a final that would save one club's season whilst breaking the other. Elsewhere, Man United were in pole position to win a 19th top-flight title until dropped points against Wigan and Everton. Any slip-up would be fatal. The Serie A continued to excite as Juve remained unbeaten, but still only led Milan by 3 points as the season approached its final games. But it wasn't just in the top leagues where football was changing, because at the time, Rangers were Scotland's dominant force in domestic football, winning the previous 3 titles and leading Celtic's total by 11 top-flight wins. But in 2012, the Glaswegian club faced financial uncertainty and lost their grip on the SPL. Celtic won the 11-12 campaign, kickstarting an era of unprecedented Scottish dominance, where they'd go on to win another 13 titles over the following 14 years to reinstate themselves as the country's most successful club. And lastly, for April, Montpellier fell to an away defeat at FC Lorient, which threatened to derail their impossible title charge. But the unlikely leaders maintained their 3-point lead over PSG as April came to a close, and all of this setting up May to be one of the greatest months in football history. Where do we even start? Football history was being written all across Europe. But let's begin in Spain, because while Madrid had already won La Liga in April and both El Clasico sides were out of the Champions League, there was still plenty to play for. The early 2010s saw social media begin to reshape the way fans connected with football. Twitter debates, meme culture, and the rise of player-led fan accounts created a new kind of loyalty among younger supporters, less centered around their local clubs and more towards superstar individuals. And no debate burned harder online than the eternal question, Messi or Ronaldo? Increasingly, young, globalized fans followed the El Clasico duo as standalone icons. Their goals, stats, and GOAT credentials became as important as their team's trophies. Ronaldo had been unstoppable through Real's record-breaking 100-point La Liga title, scoring a ridiculous 44 goals. But Messi somehow one-upped him because he scored 5 goals in the final 2 matches. Messi trailed the Portuguese forward by a goal heading into the final 2 matches to finish the season on 50 goals and win the La Liga's Golden Boot. The battle for the Ballon d'Or was well and truly on between the pair, and right now, it was neck and neck. But still, Messi and Ronaldo's race for individual supremacy in La Liga was nothing more than a footnote in the craziness of May 2012. In France, Montpellier ended the season strongly with 4 wins from 5 matches, but it wasn't enough to create a large lead over second-place PSG. But a 94th-minute winner against third-place Lille ensured they'd go into the final game against bottom-place AG Auxerre with the ability to win the league. But the final day wasn't straightforward. After 20 minutes, their already relegated opposition took the lead, threatening to spoil the party of a lifetime in Montpellier. Fortunately, John Utakis stepped up to save the day leveling the game after 32 minutes before scoring a winner in the closing stages and giving the town of Montpellier unrivaled scenes of jubilation. Montpellier had beaten the millions of PSG to win their first ever top-flight title in what turned out to be a sliding doors moment for the power dynamics of Ligue 1, because come the summer, PSG would go absolutely crazy in the transfer window, but let's not rush. In Italy, Juventus had won back-to-back games and still hadn't lost all season going into May, but with just a 3-point advantage over AC Milan and with only 3 games to go, could they keep their nerve to win the first Serie A title since their demotion from the top flight? A draw at home to 18th place Lecce put champagne on ice as Milan went within a point of the old lady heading into the final 2 matches. However, to keep the pressure on, Milan would have to navigate a tricky San Siro derby with Inter having the home advantage. Naturally, the San Siro was fueled by Inter's desperation to prevent their city rivals from winning yet another league title, and they took an early lead through Diego Milito after 14 minutes. But 2 goals from Zlatan Ibrahimovic either side of halftime turned the game on its head. At the same time, Juve were leading Cagliari, and the title race appeared set to go to the wire. But Inter were not so prepared to let their arch enemies go into the final day with a fighting chance of glory, so Milito and Maicon scored late goals to make the scoreline 4-2 as Juventus held on at Cagliari to win Serie A in dramatic circumstances. Fans swarmed the pitch to celebrate the history-making undefeated Scudetto win, with stars Andrea Pirlo, Giorgio Chiellini, Arturo Vidal, and Leonardo Bonucci. It was an evening of monumental, decade-lasting importance in Serie A because before the 11-12 season, AC and Inter Milan had dominated Italian football, winning 3 Champions Leagues and 7 Serie A titles in the previous decade. But Juventus' unbeaten title in 11-12 marked the beginning of a new era, as with increased commercial revenue from their new stadium, the club went on to win an incredible 9 consecutive league titles. Andrea Pirlo was named Serie A Player of the Season in 2012, 2013, and 2014, confirming AC Milan's decision to let him go to Juve on a free as arguably the worst in the club's entire history. Elsewhere, in Germany, Dortmund had already clinched the Bundesliga back in April, prompting wild celebrations in front of the towering yellow wall, but they had another chance to humiliate Die Klassiker rivals Bayern Munich in the DFB Pokal final. A Robert Lewandowski hat-trick powered BVB to a 5-2 victory over Bayern to clinch an iconic domestic double and dent the Bavarian club's confidence further before their Champions League final date with Chelsea later that month. And while Dortmund's back-to-back Bundesliga winning team didn't go on to experience an era of prolonged success throughout the 2010s, it birthed the careers of numerous talents who defined the decade. Jurgen Klopp later moved to Liverpool, where his gegenpressing football revolutionized the beautiful game as the English club won the Premier League and Champions League. Robert Lewandowski would eventually switch to Bayern Munich, where he'd win 8 Bundesliga trophies and a Champions League. And Ilkay Gundogan joined Man City, where he won 5 Premier League titles and a Champions League. But what was the catalyst for City's Premier League dominance? Well, we have to go back to 2011-12, a time when City had never lifted the Premier League. But with 2 games to go, they were undoubtedly closing in on their first, and this was about to go down as the most dramatic end to a Premier League season ever. After beating United under the lights at the Etihad, manager Roberto Mancini and his army of multi-million-pound recruits knew if they avoided slipping up in their final 2 matches, they'd lift the Premier League trophy. But first, a tricky away match against Newcastle at St. James Park, where 2 iconic goals from towering midfielder Yaya Touré ensured City would go into the final day ahead of United on goal difference, and barring an unlikely 10-goal swing, a final day victory over QPR would be enough to clinch their first Premier League title, irrespective of United's result against Sunderland. Beating 17th place QPR seemed like a formality, but the day unfolded into the most dramatic of Premier League and arguably European football history. What began as a fairly routine afternoon soon spiraled into chaos. At the Stadium of Light, Wayne Rooney gave Manchester United an early lead against Sunderland after 20 minutes, while over at Manchester, Pablo Zabaleta's first half strike had City ahead at the break. With 45 minutes left, City were clinging on to the top spot on goal difference, but the drama was only just beginning. Djibril Cissé equalized for QPR after 48 minutes, and the tension inside the stadium reached melting point as United continued to lead in their match. Unless Mancini's team could find a goal, they looked set to throw away the Premier League. And things got even worse, as after 66 minutes, Jamie Mackie made it 2-1 to QPR, and a shell-shocked City side was suddenly in need of 2 goals in the final 25 minutes. After 90 minutes, nothing had changed. City were still trailing. They still needed 2 goals to secure the title, and meaningful efforts at goal were sparse. To make matters worse, United had won at Sunderland as the final whistle was blown, but there was no ecstasy, eruption of noise, or celebration because seconds earlier, news that City had equalized through an Edin Dzeko goal had broken through. The citizens continued to push as time ran out, and the rest is history.
Aguero!
Man City had done it. They'd finally won the Premier League title, and this day marked a shift in English football as Man City went on to dominate the league over the next decade, whilst United won just one more title in 2013 before falling so hard from grace. The football world couldn't stop talking about the final day of the Premier League season for weeks, but attention eventually diverted to the Champions League final between Chelsea and Bayern Munich that was going to be played in Bayern Munich's own stadium, making this game that much harder for Chelsea. For 83 minutes, the game was hardly a classic, but in the final kick of injury time, and with Chelsea's hopes diminishing by the second, Didier Drogba provided a clutch moment as he headed while Lam scored as Bayern edged closer to glory. But Chelsea responded well by scoring their next three as Munich's Olic and Schweinsteiger missed spot kicks. Suddenly, Drogba, the man who had devastatingly missed out on AFCON glory on spot kicks with Ivory Coast earlier that year, stepped up to take the final kick. To add to the drama, Blue, after announcing he'd leave at the end of the season, the legendary striker stuttered his run-up slightly, sent Neuer the wrong way, and rolled the ball into the corner. In that split second, everything changed. Chelsea were European champions. Drogba wheeled away in pure ecstasy, arms wide, running toward the sea of blue. There was no choreography, just raw release and years of agony undone in a heartbeat. What a month. And after all that, football fans were truly spoiled in 2012 because the Euros were about to kick off, meaning the magic was far from over. On the back of 2008 and 2010 international triumphs, Spain were the clear favorites heading into the tournament, and with the likes of Xavi and Iniesta. But there were two other nations that posed a threat to Spain's domination. Germany, who lost to Spain in the 2008 final, had a star-studded squad including Khedira, Özil, Neuer, and Schweinsteiger. And Italy were bolstered by the stars of Juventus' Serie A win, including Andrea Pirlo and Giorgio Chiellini. The group stages ended with all the tournament's major contenders progressing. In the quarterfinals, Spain impressed with a commanding 2-0 win over France, while Andrea Pirlo humiliated England with a cheeky Panenka in a penalty shootout to send Italy through. Cristiano Ronaldo boosted his Ballon d'Or credentials by scoring the winner against the Czech Republic, and Germany overpowered Greece 4-2. Portugal faced favored Spain in the first semi-final. If Ronaldo could drag his inferior team to international glory against the stars of Barcelona and Real Madrid's uber-successful club teams, he'd undoubtedly become the favorite for the Ballon d'Or. The game ended 0-0 after 90 minutes, and the score remained the same after extra time. The semi-finals' cagey nature limited Ronaldo to speculative efforts throughout normal time, but now the Portuguese forward would finally have an opportunity to make his mark on the game and send his nation to the final. Except he didn't. Ronaldo opted to take his penalty fifth in an attempt to take the game-winning spot kick, but after Moutinho and Alves missed penalties for Portugal, Spain won the shootout and booked their place in the final without CR7 even touching the ball. The other semi-final saw Italy bad boy Mario Balotelli terrorize Germany with two ruthless strikes, the second prompting the forward to remove his shirt and flex his muscles to reveal a ripped physique that became one of the most iconic football images of the year. Germany scored a late consolation goal through an Özil penalty, but it wasn't enough to stop Italy marching on to meet Spain in the final. Even though Spain won the 2008 Euros and the 2010 World Cup, winning a third consecutive international tournament seemed a ridiculous feat to achieve. Before Spain, no European team had won back-to-back international tournaments, never mind three. A victory against Italy in the 2012 final would make the Golden Team immortal in an international context. But Spain had already played Italy and were frustrated by the Italians during the group stages as they endured a sluggish 1-1 draw, and Italy's defensive structure appeared equipped to deal with the playmaking talents of Spain, and many in the media tipped them to prevent Vincente Del Bosque's side from from picking up yet another award. Despite lofty expectations, things unraveled quickly for Italy. Man City star David Silva slotted the opener for Spain after 14 minutes, and Valencia's Jordi Alba doubled the lead before halftime. As the Spanish midfield played triangles among each other, Italy's Andrea Pirlo helplessly chased shadows, resembling a lost schoolboy more than the greatest Italian maestro of his generation. Spain scored 2 late second-half goals through Chelsea duo Fernando Torres and Juan Mata to seal the most emphatic Euros final scoreline in history and become the first international team to ever win 3 back-to-back tournaments. With the Euros concluded, the transfer window had now opened, and clubs were looking to spend big as the world of football was going to change forever. PSG and Man United were gearing up in the transfer market to prevent recent title winners Man City and Montpellier from establishing eras of dominance on their own. PSG signs Zlatan Ibrahimovic, fresh off scoring the goal of the tournament at Euro 2012, and Brazil captain Thiago Silva from AC Milan. Almost immediately, their investment paid dividends. PSG won their first league title in 19 years during 12-13 and laid the foundations for a super team that would transform French football, winning 11 of the next 13 Ligue 1 trophies. It's safe to say Montpellier may have won the battle of 2012, but PSG definitely won the war. Meanwhile, Man City's 94th minute title win must have scared the bosses at Old Trafford, because United went all out to sign Arsenal striker Robin van Persie. The Dutch striker eventually joined the Red Devils for £22 million in one of the most controversial transfer sagas of all time, and RVP helped United secure a 20th Premier League title during the 12-13 season, but he was just a temporary plaster over a hole because nobody could have foreseen the utter dominance of Man City during the following years. The once belittled, noisy neighbors won an outstanding 7 of the next 11 Premier League titles, including an unprecedented 4 back-to-back triumphs between 2021 and 2024, and even picked up a treble of their own as they start to rival United's legacy in English football. The moment you've all been waiting for. Whilst this whole year has been going on, one thing remained constant throughout. Lionel Messi just would not